Welcome to the first episode of the Communicate Now podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Smith, and here we talk about everything related to effective communication skills in the world of business. Everything from sales to negotiation to leadership, and my personal favorite, how to win friends and influence people. Now, today I have a very special guest, Mr. Franco Espinoza, an incredible salesman working at Tony Robbins' company, Robbins Research International. Welcome, Franco. So happy to have you here today. How are you doing?
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here. I'm excited to get into things.
Nice, nice. So this is the first podcast on this channel, which is going to blow up and be bigger than Joe Rogan, obviously. And
Obviously, that's
yeah,
the direction you're heading.
that's the direction. That's the direction that's going to go, right? I stay optimistic, and I think a lot of people that come here are really going to appreciate learning about communication skills that they use all day long at work, at home, and the power of persuasion and the power of influence, especially used from a very authentic standpoint and an honest and sincere standpoint, can be incredibly powerful in anyone's life, and I highly recommend it to everyone. So I think a lot of people will really appreciate watching something like this. I think they're really going to appreciate what you have to say, and
Yeah.
we'll just get right into it.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, so first of all, there's two things I want to talk about today. One would be sales communication, and then one would be networking communication. And so, of course, the same principles tend to apply in terms of effective communication, but I'm going to start off with sales specifically. So, what would you say your main philosophy is when it comes to the way you communicate with your prospects?
Great question. I mean, really, it's all about active listening. Somebody is coming to the call. They've shown up for a reason, right? They're looking to, in my case, right, with Tony Robbins, they want to do something to transform their lives. They usually have a goal that they're working on, or they're in a current situation that they're not happy with anymore, and they want to see a change. Right. So the whole idea behind the conversation is really understanding where they're at, what their gap is, where it is that they want to be. And also to really hear the heart behind it. Right. I mean, I talk to people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, in a lot of different countries as well. And so, people have amazing different stories about where they ended up and where they want to take their life. So yeah, the idea is pretty simple. I mean, how can you facilitate that change? So for me, I really like my position because I get to influence that initial change. They're on the phone, they're thinking about, they scheduled the call, they're thinking about making a change in their life. So now the idea is, okay, well, how can I help this person? How can I help influence change in this person? Like, for example, if somebody tells me, I grew up my whole life in apartments and my family, came from a place of poverty, but now I've worked on myself. I went through school, I went through college. I'm trying to start a business now. And I want to be a millionaire. Like I take that goal very seriously, and so does my company. So now the idea is, okay, so what are our next steps? What are your goals? What are your challenges? Right? What's the gap between where you are and where you want to be? And how can we get you to take this next step forward? And the idea, of course, linking it to coaching and how coaching can support them if it's the best fit.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say is that do you find during the calls that when you talk about your own circumstances, or if you ever talk about your own circumstances, does it generate a type of connection in which they gain trust with you and helps with the sale?
Yeah, it depends on the person, right? I mean, like, for example, there's some health things that I've personally been through. So when I talk to somebody about their health goals, I can relate a lot to that, and I can talk about the challenges that I faced, and sort of when they hear that, I get a lot of, yeah, that's exactly what I've been going through, right? Same thing when it comes to business goals, same things when it comes to success. And so I can almost read what their challenges are without them having to say it, and so it creates a kind of connection where they feel like somebody is listening to them, who knows what they're going through, who has been able to practice the pathway of success in their own. Now that person's there to serve them, right? And that's the idea.
That's great. One thing I notice about you, Franco, is that you're very calm and relaxed when you speak. And I think it allows people to feel very comfortable because they may be coming in with all of the stress and anxiety because this is about personal development, right? And so
Mhm.
people are coming in with all sorts of difficult issues. And I can imagine that when you talk with them, you kind of calm them down a little bit. And that's probably really important in sales in general, maybe to even, do you find that you purposefully change your tone to seem more, or does it just come naturally as you feel it?
That's a great question. I believe that it depends on the person's energy, right? I do like to match their energy, but I don't like to match somebody's energy if they're in a really depressed state,
Uh,
right? If I'm noticing that they're coming in like that, I don't like to match that energy. What I like to do is I like to just be me. I'm also not going to be balls off the wall or anything like that because that doesn't help. Um, but what I do is, I like to kind of take them where they're at and match their energy. But I retain myself. I'm typically cool, calm, and collected unless you get me excited about something, right? So then if I get excited, I'm going to be my excited self. So that's what I do is, I'm just me on the call. Sometimes I'm cool, sometimes I'm calm, other times I get really excited. And then, if somebody really needs a kick, which sometimes they do, right? I mean, like they've been living a life of mediocrity. And that means that, they might have this goal to become really, really successful. And maybe they say they want to leave their corporate job to start a business and they want to make $10 million, right?
yeah,
But right now they're making 200,000 a year as a director. Well, they're very successful, but they've been stuck in a position for 10 years that they're not happy with. And really they have this goal and they've had a goal since they were children. And so now, they need a kick to move forward. So it's all about understanding why they're in the situation, why they haven't made that change. And then there's going to be times where I do change my tone in the call to kind of bring the hammer down. It's like, all right, when's the time to make a change? Right. And so, of course, this is all going to depend on how the conversation is going and
yeah,
what points we reach in that conversation to get me to do something like that. But yeah, those tonal shifts are important.
yeah. And do you find, because for example, what you said, someone that makes $200,000 a year, that's a pretty good living. I'd say that's pretty good. And he wants to make 1 million, or he wants to get up to 1 million or 10 million. Do you ever encounter a circumstance where you might consider that his happiness may not be dependent on that, and that you take his goals into consideration, but maybe suggest that another goal would even be better for him? For example, yeah, you can make a lot more money, but how are you going to feel in the process? How are you going to, are you actually going to enjoy what you do? Like, do you need to reach that goal, which is so high? Or
Mhm.
do you just want to feel more comfortable and more secure in your life? Do you go strictly with what their goals are? Or do you ever kind of try and tweak it to think you may have a better idea of what they
Good question. So, well, yes and no. So basically, I like to really unpack what they're telling me first, right? If they give me a goal, I like to do some discovery on that goal to make sure that that's really a must for them, that that's really what their goal is. They're trying, and then to really understand what their ideal life is that they're looking to create. Like, why are you trying to accomplish that goal? Right. So, and is it a must? Why is it a must? Right. Those questions are really important to unpack the situation, to see how serious they are about it, and if this is really what they want. What's the big driver behind that? Once I have all of those questions, then I'm certain that we're on the right track. We can proceed with the rest of the call. There are other situations though where it's kind of like what you've described, where I can sort of sense that they're a little bit in conflict with themselves, and so I start to ask them some questions to really uncover the truth. To give you an example, I've had this happen multiple times where somebody is in a crossroads between starting a business or developing in their career jobs. And what I do to unpack that is I start to ask them questions about what they really want. Like, if they could have any ideal life, what would that be? And most of the time, when people are telling me, oh, I want freedom, I want to be able to travel whenever I want to be my own boss, I want to make X amount of money, I want to have time freedom to raise my kids, all these freedom based things, then I kind of recenter the call and I say, okay, so does that sound like something that you can do growing in your career job that you just described to me has a lot of regulations in it and is time consuming? Or is that freedom better found in a business? right? And so this is where now they start to say, no, actually, what I really want to do is start a business.
Yeah.
So from there, this is what we can coach them on. Now, as for the mechanisms and the pathway for how we're going to go from where they're at now to where they really want to be, which is to have that freedom in their life, that's where the call is going to go. We're going to talk about that. And then, when they enroll, and the coach is going to help them come up with that game plan. But at least in that call, we got to get a definitive breakthrough, right? You get to decide who you're going to be and what life you get to live. You get to decide on your outcome. So what do you want? I mean, do you want to be in this corporate job that, sure, you're successful in this corporate job, or do you want to have that freedom through a business? There's a lot of emotion and a lot of substance that you're giving me with this. And it sounds like this is what you want to do. And so now we can have a conversation on the real heart behind what they have. We can decide on that outcome. We can transform their lives.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. And, when you talked about sometimes you need to give someone a little bit of a kick,
Yeah.
just to kind of, because they might be stuck or think I can't do it, or I don't want to do it, or it's not possible. You have to give them a little bit of a kick. I mean, whenever I encounter a situation like that with my friends or people, even acquaintances, and they tell me about their issues, I really hate getting into that mode where I'm like the big brother that needs to just like, get off your ass and get the job done. So, but how do you encounter that? Do you change your tone? Do you turn into more of maybe an authoritative tone? Or do you move into a more empathetic tone where you may kind of project what will happen if they don't achieve don't take action now, and then what will happen if they do take action, and then maybe they look at the difference and think, oh wow, yeah, I do need to do something. Like, how do you approach that?
Well, we do get into that stuff. We get into it a little bit later. I guess the kick really happens. It depends on their tone, right? So, for example, if there's somebody who is like really high D, right? We use the DISC assessment. The DISC assessment helps me determine their personality type. That really helps on the call. So if they're like a really high D, then I can have very direct conversation with them easily, right? If they're coming at me with this kind of like a real business attitude. Now, if they're crying on the call, which that happens sometimes, then it's a little bit different, because I want to get to that point, but it's a buildup. Like, I'm not just all of a sudden going to shift my tone, right? And encourage them and give them that kick. I'm going to slowly kind of ease into it and kind of meet them where they're at and match my tone to it as well. Right. I mean, if they're crying and they're telling me about all the reasons why they've struggled to move forward in life, and they're telling me about all the reasons that, they're talking to me about their childhood and all these things that have been holding them back, I don't like to partner with any of that. I like to, and this is one of my philosophies too, is I always believe in the idea of always be challenging, not in a bad way, but in the call, we reach these moments where I like to go against the grain of what they're telling me, to the point where, this is kind of an exaggeration, but just so the point, comes across, saying the opposite of everything that they tell me. Right. So if they start talking to me about their limiting patterns or the limiting beliefs, I just disagree and say the opposite. It's kind of hard to give an example with this, but the idea behind that is, it's pattern interruptions, right? It's, let's not continue down this train of thought. Other times, if people are just really down on themselves and are like, yeah, that's it, it's over. You're not going to make it.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, right? And I say that to them, and I usually get a laugh at that, and I kind of pause for a little bit, and they have this little chuckle, and then we can recenter the conversation and say, like, that's not true, right? You're on this call because you're holding out hope that there is something that can support you, something that can change. You get to decide what you want in life. So what do you want? And then what are your challenges? And then, along the way, the idea is reframing their thinking as well, right? So part of the process is encouraging. The other part of the process is really interrupting their patterns, because they came to this call for breakthrough. So we want them to have breakthrough.
Well, okay, there's a few things I want to unpack there, because I know that Tony Robbins is an NLP genius, or if anyone watching this doesn't know what NLP stands for, it stands for neuro-linguistic programming. The definition might be a little bit out of my scope to just say exactly what it is right now, but I didn't realize it seems that you are using some of these techniques as well, because you spoke about pattern interruption and then you spoke about reframing.
Yeah.
So are you using neurolinguistic programming techniques as well? Is that something that you were taught at Robbins Research, or is it something that you've been using for quite a while?
So I understand the principle of it. I have not been formally trained in NLP.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, my team uses those skills, right? Because the idea is we do want to interrupt the pattern, and we can get away with doing that here because at this offer, specifically working with Tony Robbins, I mean, this is the world that we live in, right? This is how we do things. You know, people are familiar with that style from Tony. So, you know, if somebody's going down a rabbit hole with their limiting beliefs and they're talking to me about all the reasons that they can't succeed, we have to do something to interrupt that pattern, right? Because then they're going too far into a place that's disempowered that doesn't serve them, right? So we do have to do something to interrupt the pattern.
All right. Yeah, let's move on to, there is, let me just check here. I have these written down here,
Yeah.
some of them, so I don't forget them. I can't wing everything. Where was it? It was a question I had about, um, okay. Okay, I've never been someone okay, so I know that that the prospects you speak with are often dealing with very difficult life circumstances.
Yes.
When you're talking to people that are going through a very rough time, how do you find that empathy plays a role in the way that you're interacting with them? And does it change from person to person?
It does change from person to person. It definitely does. And it depends on the feelings that they're coming to me with, right? Like for example, and I'm not sure if empathy is the right word. Sometimes I feel empathy, you know. Other times it's sympathy. I feel empathy when it's stuff that I can personally relate to, but I do 100 sessions a month, you know. So
Yeah.
you know, there's I can listen to people, I can have sympathy. Sometimes there's that empathy, but I also have to be a little bit emotionally detached from that because it's not going to serve them if I go into super empathetic mode and then it turns into a therapy session like that. That
Yeah.
doesn't serve anybody, right? That's not what we're doing. And at the end of the day, I'm not the coach, right? At the end of the day, I'm the coaching strategist. I'm a salesperson, but it's a little bit different. It's definitely a different sale. Like I'm not, this is totally different than any other kind of environment that I've sold in. You know, we're really influencing change versus just closing deals, right? Which I think is a key distinction. Um, but yeah, empathy is really important. I mean, people want to feel empathy, sympathy, but people want to feel like they're understood. And so as they're talking and I'm reading between the lines, when I come back to them to make sure that I understood what they said, you know, I give them a quick recap sometimes. It's really helpful when they've just given me their heart and I'm able to recount it back to them in detail and oftentimes like hit one other point that's a big aha for them, you know. And so from that place, now they start to see me as more of an authority and as somebody who actually cares.
Uh, yeah.
So sympathy, yes, sympathy, empathy, it's really important, because especially when people have been going through some tough situations, you know, and they're now looking to transform their lives. And I think, you know, as salespeople as well, like at the end of the call, this also comes into play because this helps me gauge how exactly the end of this call should be. I mean, like how much am I going to be able to push somebody in a situation like this? You know, and sometimes the answer is you don't want to push anything, right? I mean, pressure creates diamonds or pressure bursts pipes. Personally, I'm a champion for people to be diamond people, right? But other times you can't, it's not the wisest thing to do with someone. So you kind of have to tone it down a little bit. So empathy is important.
And I guess a lot of that comes with experience. I mean, trial and error is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
You know, of course, with the experience you have, that's why you do well for yourself.
Yeah.
Now, who are, who would you say? I mean, there's so many of the greats out there, the sales trainers out there that are just incredible, that are so popular, and many of them have completely different philosophies. The way that they speak, they communicate very differently. Some people use tones that are very subtle, almost like customer service. Other ones are really, really bold and outright and have like a strong sales pitch, like you heard it on a commercial. What
Yeah.
what were some of the greats? Like, what was one of your favorite sales trainers that you saw that changed your outlook? And the way that they communicated that changed your outlook on the world of sales in general, and your career, it changed you.
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's not anyone, nobody famous. It's no famous marketing sales trainer or anyone like that. I mean, there are some big names,
Yeah.
right, that we can just rattle off. It's none of those guys. In fact, I spent most of my time studying personal development, people like Jim Rohn, Tony Robbins' mentor, and then Tony Robbins. So more personal development world. In sales specifically, my old mentor that I had when I first started in this online selling space, I'm not going to say his name because he is very private. He actually has like lawyers that go out of their way to pull his presence offline. Really private guy. He was a Wall Street broker when he first started. He was a stockbroker. And then very successful doing that. Make a long story short, he launched and scaled businesses from 0 to $100 million. Did this more than once. With one particular example, he did this and sold the business in like 2 years. So you would not know who this person is. They're not like a famous person at all. But when they trained me, my boss hired him to work with us one-on-one. And when he trained me, his sales methodology was so simple. It was just so easy. There was a pattern to everything that he did. Um, and it just like took all the noise that was in the space, all the stuff from all these different trainers, all the overcomplication, and just made it super simple. The sales process is really easy from top to bottom, following the same language, kind of the same language patterns, whether it's asking questions, answering questions, whether it's objection handling. It was all on a loop, right? And it was just really easy to apply it because all you had to do is master the pattern. And I remember, getting help from him with handling objections and things like that. And it was always so simple. It's like, Franco, you address the objection, deliver your value, and then close the loop. Once again, ask for the sale. And I remember, hearing him do it and him giving me the advice. And I was like, okay, all right, if this is really all it is, let's just do this. And so I started to apply it. My closing ratio shot up to 70% at that one particular offer.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
That's
probably not doing it justice at all with my explanation. It's kind of hard to describe it without giving specific examples or going more into detail or telling or broadcasting his name. But yeah, it was incredible. I mean, I was setting my own appointments at that offer, and closing deals at 70% closing ratio was awesome. And I owe it to him, because of him, I was able to take that skill set into my next position. Got promoted as a manager there. And I learned from different people like Cole Gordon. With what Cole Gordon's done, I mean, say what you will about Cole Gordon. I mean, I like his sales training. It's really helped me out a lot. I've added that to my style as well. And there's other people in the space as well. Like, for example, Jeremy Miner's NEPQ. I had some unofficial training with NEPQ. I did have an NEPQ coach help me at one point when I was working for a company.
okay.
I do like that style a lot. I don't take anything. I don't take like 100% from any one style. I match it with my natural style, with what I learned from my mentor, from all these different people. But it's really simple. There's just another person on the other side of the phone. So listen to them, and they're there for a reason. Help them. Just have a frame of mind of being ready to serve. And just like Tony says, show up in peak state. Be ready to, when you're in a peak state, when you're in a better state, your mind just starts to flow in a much better way. Like, sometimes I'll ask questions or I'll perform in a way that afterwards I'm like, where did that even come from? How did I even do that? But hey, just change this person's life, and that's something I'm happy about. But yeah, short answer is
Yeah.
no one famous, just my mentor.
That's great. That's great. And now, when it comes to networking, so you started networking in the remote sales space online, right? So making yourself visible, getting to know people in your dream companies. What did you find was the most effective approach when you put yourself out there to get networking meetings with these guys?
The most effective approach was commenting on other people's posts.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing to do. I still do it now. When somebody asks a question, I love going in there and delivering value. I've got the top contributor badge inside of UCM and inside of, I think it's 7th level or 7-figure selling academy. I can't
Yeah. Yeah.
remember.
Hmm.
And so, that I like doing that. I like commenting and engaging. That alone gives me enough visibility, and people are coming to me, and the people are really appreciating my responses. So that was my preferred method. The second method was direct outreach. If there's somebody who I really wanted to reach out to, I would just add them as a friend and send them an honest message. And in my opinion, look, this is how I got the Tony Robbins job. And in my opinion, this is really a great way to connect with somebody. Is just send them a direct message. It might be cold, but if you're coming from it from a genuine place where you're being specific to them as to why specifically you want to reach out to them, you tell them quick nugget as to who you are, why you're reaching out, why specifically them. Don't be afraid if it's a longer thing. Don't make it like pages long, but also like for example, for me, I don't like getting those small messages that are like 1 or 2 sentences. Like that just doesn't really work for me. But when somebody reaches out and it's like this bigger message and there's substance to what they have said, I'll stop and read that. And then if I notice that they genuinely did their homework on me and genuinely have tried reaching out, I'm happy to connect with them. So I did that as well in the past. And that's actually why I have the Tony Robbins shop.
So, doing your homework on someone, that's a really good point that you brought up. Doing your homework on someone and then bringing it up or a question related to the homework that you did on them, do you find that that makes a huge difference in the comment section, or do you find that makes a huge difference in the comment section, or is it just specifically when you're speaking privately with them?
I think it hits better privately. I think in the comments section, it's better. It's more like what's happening in that moment, what the topic is, what's the discussion. But then in the DMs, really that's where you can get specific.
Yeah.
And it's not always, doing homework and pulling some fact about the person. I mean, that's a strategy, but just being honest about your intentions, why are you reaching out, and giving a good solid reason, like you're doing this on purpose. They're not just one of 100 people that you sent an outreach message
Yeah.
to. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Can you hear that?
so
Can you
what's
hear
that?
that? I have a couple babies in the house right now. Can you hear that,
Oh
or are
no, I
we
couldn't hear them.
okay?
I couldn't hear them. Couldn't hear them.
Okay.
Now, I want to bring up the law of reciprocity. So anyone who's watching that who doesn't know what that is, I mean, it's spoken about widely um, in sales.
Mhm.
Now, I'll just recite the definition here just to gain some context. So it says the law of reciprocity, as explained in Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, refers to the psychological principle that people feel compelled to return a favor or gesture of kindness when one is received. This means that if someone does something for you, you naturally feel an obligation to do something for them in return. Now, my question for you is, now, I'll say that great rapport building skills make the people you're interacting with feel the urge to reciprocate, especially if you're showing interest in them. So during your networking meetings, like when you were speaking on Zoom with people, how did you manage to leverage the law of reciprocity when you were developing these relationships that helped you land your dream job?
That's a great question. I think it was more, I showed up with a genuine willingness to do something for someone, to provide value. And some of the best networking relationships I had, I mean, it was mostly just great conversations. There was not always necessarily something given and something received. There were times where I offered and, the person just, they didn't necessarily take anything. But now, I mean, through those relationships that have developed, I mean, there are some people that I know who can just reach out to me on a DM and, if they want to come work here, or, if they want to, if they want to get an interview or something, and that's like a big thing that people are always asking all the time, because of these relationships. I mean, they're genuine relationships. Yeah, there's a couple names right off the bat that, if they wanted that, and I'm helping somebody right now in this process. They can definitely count on me. Um, are there any other examples, like, or did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, you answer every question. You answer them well. I'll say that.
Okay.
I say that. You're my
Good.
first guest here, but I think you're going to be my guest one. Everyone else is going to have to. You're setting the bar, and I think everyone else is going to feel nervous to because they're going to watch this. You're setting the bar, so they're going to want to reach your level. But
This is the practice round. I
this is
definitely
the
have to come
practice
back
round.
for round two at some point in the future.
Yeah,
100th episode.
definitely. Definitely, definitely. And yeah, no, you did answer my question. Another thing, just off the top of my head, is because today I was reading. I mean, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People repeatedly, and I take notes, highlight paragraphs, and read it. Now, one thing is always stated that speak to the interests of the other person. Do you find that speaking to the interests, like when you're networking with people, do you notice that you tend to do that? Do you put your focus on them, what their interests are? Because I know it's not good to come into a networking meeting with a self-serving attitude, like, what can I get out of
Mhm.
this? We all
Yeah.
know those people, we've met them before, or they'll go on a networking call with us and they just want something from us and we can feel it. And it's just like, man, I don't want anything to do with that. So is expressing interest in what they do and what their interests are, is that something that you focus on during your interactions?
I'll be honest with my style. And again, going back to my disc assessment, I'm a very high D, but I'm a very low I. So what that means is, D stands for dominance, I stands for influence. So that I tends to be the more social side of you, right?
Okay.
And for me, I've always been more introverted and stuff. I always had friends growing up, and but there's certain things that how do I describe this? The reason why networking was a challenge for me at first was because I always felt that it was a real social thing, and so
Yeah.
for me, that was always a little bit harder. Now, on the D side, though, I'm really good when I create a structure for myself. I'm really good when I have an intent, a purpose, and that's what I go for. So what I like to do is I like to show up to the networking meetings, and I have a goal for that conversation. And I like to just show up myself, be friendly, have a good energy about me, but let them know, hey, this is why I'm on. And I think showing them genuine interest in the things I'm actually interested in, and also understanding more about their character in those interests. Like, for example, in the beginning, when I was looking at working at different companies, and I wanted to get, just like Hunter says, right, get information, get contacts, get names. That was the goal, but I wanted to know the person that I was talking to, so I asked them, about their track record and their background, and how it is that they developed, how it is that they got started. All those things are really important to me because, well, that's all really important for me personally. So I like to learn it in somebody else, right? I mean, that's I had big goals when I first started in this space. I have a crazy story of how I first started in this space, and I love hearing other people's stories. It hasn't been easy. Especially my first year was not easy at all. So I love hearing about people's backgrounds. All those things I'm genuinely interested in. And then, still with this idea of what's my goal, let's accomplish this goal in the conversation, because we're on a networking meeting. We want to be cool with each other, we want to be friendly, we want to have good reciprocity, build good rapport, but we also, we're accomplishing something, in my opinion.
Now, I was just on a networking call. Well, I don't know if I would call it a networking call because I wanted to become a communication coach. And that is exactly what I'm doing right now. Part of the reason I'm doing interviews like this, so we can just learn as much as we can about communication. I was on a call with a university professor, and he's a professor in communication. Now, he pretty much laid out the entire groundwork for what I should be doing and what I should be studying. Do you find that it has been more experience that has the experience of applying what you're doing when you're speaking that has made you improve, or do you find that it was more of the theory behind it, or was it, obviously it's going to be a combination of the two, but which do you think was more important, the theory that you learned, or the trial and error of doing it? Which do you think got you better with your communication skills?
For sales, networking
For sales or
or just
networking,
in general
either
or
in
both?
general, I would say, yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay. And sorry, which what was those two things?
There's the actual experience of communicating, and then there's the theory of it, like stuff that you'll read in books and the education that you get. Which do you think made is something that made you better during your communication in sales and also in networking as well?
Experience for sure, the trial and error specifically with sales. I still do that, like um if I feel like I have a really good session, I'll go back and I'll listen to the calls and I'll listen to all the things that came out of me. And then I start to create, and I start to iterate on my process based on that, because that all lives inside of me. It came out of me in that moment. And so I like to reverse engineer that. And I've been doing that since I started in sales way back when I was doing door to door. That's a whole long story, but that's how I began. They gave me this little script and I kind of envisioned the process. And then I went out, applied it, and then made improvements on it. So definitely trial and error, definitely experience. And that helped me learn super fast. And then in terms of theory, I think that theory for me over skills, it was more the mindset. Whenever I learned something about a skill or I learned a reason why something worked, whether it was communication or anything else or sales or anything, these aha moments that you get, or like you feel like you've kind of leveled up because you've gained like new knowledge. I feel like just engaging people with a different way of thinking based on this theory, this idea that you've learned, that's what causes the stuff to sort of, that's what causes the growth as well. And then from there, you can listen to yourself or play those conversations back and think, oh, this is what I did that was really good. This is how I can apply that to myself moving forward. So super high level, but yeah, I think that with anything that I've learned, when I've had those aha moments in my mindset where I feel like something has just unlocked itself, and then I go into a situation with that thinking, that's what really produces a lot of results. And then to iterate on that process with experience, yeah, that's what's contributed to the growth.
Great. And before I wrap this up, I just want to talk about, because you had mentioned Hunter in your when you were answering the last question. So just to the audience here, Hunter is the head coach at the Undeniable Closer Mastermind of School, of which I am a part of, and has made an incredible change in my life in terms of networking and finding remote sales jobs. I mean, it has changed everything. Within 3 weeks, I found a job. Well, within 3 weeks, they hired me to to Undeniable Closer. And
There
yeah,
you go.
I know, right? I know. And we went into a group of 4 people, and JD coached us, and we all found jobs within, and I got hired, and they all found jobs within 3 weeks. It was 2 to 3 weeks, something like that. And they had no
Yeah, it's quick.
experience in remote sales, none. So yeah, that was incredible. And you guys can go check out the Facebook group at Undeniable Closer. Come in there, you'll probably see me. I post in there. And, I really just want to thank you, Franco, for coming on this first episode. It really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. And, just being able to do this and just being able to do something that I love and having someone come in and be on the same page as me, it really does mean a lot. And I think that just this interview itself is going to mean a lot to a lot of people that are watching it, because there's nuggets of information they've always wanted to know, but they never knew how to ask the correct question, or they've never had someone give them enough time to
Yeah.
actually teach them. So I think it's going to be really beneficial for them. So thanks so much for coming in, Franco. I think we'll wrap this up now. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we go?
I mean, for anybody who's trying to make it out there, you can. This is what I say to my prospects: just decide, what's my outcome, and am I willing to do whatever it takes to get there? And if the answer to that is yes, then just keep pursuing it. You're going to get there. Just do it from that place of power.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Franco. And I'm just going to wrap up the interview right now. See you guys later.